Okay, today what we're doing is we're building a low tunnel inside of our high tunnel. The low tunnel is being used for holding up our fabric cloth above our plants. This is the same type of construction as you would do out in the field, with the only real difference being inside you don't need to have as deep an anchor, so we only use a 2-foot 3/8 inch fence rod. This is a fiberglass fence rod. You can buy these at farm supply stores. But the construction itself is the same. The first thing is the key to this construction is putting a stop so that the actual hoop itself does not go into the ground. What we do is we use a piece of scrap drip tape, punch a hole in it, and stick it on to the actual fiberglass rod. Then the next thing that we do is we have to actually make a loop anchor that goes on the rod underneath this stop, and this is what we then run our strings over our hoops to hold down fabric cloth or plastic. Okay, typically what we do to make a hoop that goes in the anchor post is we use baling twine about 18 inches. We'll cut that. And then what we're going to do is splice the ends of this 18-inch string together to form a loop. We simply use a very basic knot. I don't know if it's called a square knot or a slip knot, but basically it's tied in such a way that the opposite end of the string can move. You make one knot on one side, do exactly the same on the other. Once that's done, you can pull the two ends opposing together and it forms a very tight loop. The next step is to put this loop into a figure 8. So put the knot, the splice knot, in your left hand, between your thumb and your forefinger, and then cross over with your right hand, and then take the bottom loop and come up through the top loop, and by pulling that you create a perfect figure 8, which is also a slip knot. Going back to our fence rod, we put the slip knot into, tighten it around the rod, and see now it is below the anchor piece of drip tape. And then we can put, based on your spacing, you'll know where to put your hoops. You simply, plant the rod into the ground, and the rod itself then becomes where the hoop will go over, and this is your anchor string. Okay, what we covered in the other video was how to actually make the anchor loop against the anchor post. In here you'll see these are actually completed low tunnels, and what we're going to talk about now is how do we anchor the actual covering to the hoop. These hoops are spaced on roughly 10 feet apart because inside we don't really need a really tight, heavy-duty, robust system. If you were doing this in the field for snow load, you'd probably use a metal hoop and you would space them about 4 feet apart. Okay, the actual hoops in here are small. They're approximately 6 foot. They don't need to be super high for what we're doing in here. So to form the anchor on it now, we've slipped the hoops over the actual anchor post itself, and as you can see there's an anchor string. And this is done on both sides. There's an anchor string on both sides. The hoop slips over the rods and becomes actually quite sturdy. The last step is to anchor the covering to the hoop. And what we do with this is, since this is a 6-foot hoop, we don't need a complete double like 12 feet, but approximately 11 feet or so of additional baling twine. And on one end what we do is we tie a loop off, okay? And then to string it, what we'll do is drop it over, since we're right-handed, we drop it over the looped end over the right side. And then we'll take that loop and we'll run it through the ground anchor from right to left, And again, if you're left-handed, it would be the opposite. We'll string it over the top. Then, taking the non-looped end, we'll run it through the anchor on this side. And we'll now be able to start to tighten down your fabric against the actual hoop itself by putting the string through the loop. You can even things up by pulling down. Downward pressure tightens it. You hold it with your other hand. Now you can see what's happened here is the covering is being depressed on both sides pretty much equally by the string. And when you've got it to the right deflection, which what we do then is we then tie it off by using a very basic slip knot. And we'll just pull it up. The slip knot is tight, string is tight, and the covering has a nice deflection. Now the nice thing about this design is, even in the field by using plastic, what you'll notice is the covering is being held tight against the hoop. This system is what gives it its strength. So you can push the covering up and down, and inside of a hoop house for putting floating row cover over, it's very fast. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to walk down, push this thing up, and probably 5-10 minutes to get it all set back up again at night. Now the nice thing about pushing it up in the morning is it goes to the center, you get good airflow. The other thing that's important to know is that these anchor strings, the pulling up is going to be opposing forces. With the hoop is going to be pushed down by the pull down of the top. Any force that's against the string itself, say if a wind got under it and tried to lift it up, it goes against the post itself and not the hoop. So this is what gives this its strength, is its hoop. The forces that would lift a covering are actually displaced against the ground anchor itself. One last thing to show is how do we tie these coverings off. What we do is simple inside. It's about a 30-inch T-post. We'll pound it into the ground with the exception of maybe 4 or 5 inches on top. And then we tie our covering off fairly tight before we put on the individual anchors, the strings on the individual hoops. This is done on both ends, and so this keeps the fabric cloth or covering of any kind fairly tight. We don't use a ratchet system inside the hoop house because we don't need that much strength. But if you are putting a low tunnel out in the field, we use a very basic ratchet. That's a fence type tensioning ratchet you can get at a farm supply store. These typically cost $3 or $4 and they last a very long time, and you can put a lot of tension against them. So hopefully this answers your questions today, and thanks.